All right, I'm recording. So go ahead and set up your posture. Getting as comfortable as possible without falling asleep. So you're relaxed but alert. And bring your awareness down into your body, so away from your head, where we usually think so much of our thoughts are located. So down into your abdomen or your hips or your heart, even. Becoming aware of the sensations in your body. And you can take some deep breaths to help your relaxation and your focus on your body. Really deep, and watch them. So, bringing to mind your intention for doing this course, your motivation, your reason for engaging in the Buddhist path. Sometimes we might think that by starting with ourselves, by focusing on ourselves first, taking time out to do meditation, to do a class like this is somehow selfish. But the teachings tell us that we have to start with ourselves. If we're going to lead anyone anywhere, we have to know where we're going. So, our intention to learn and to practice first for ourselves so that we can be a competent leader for others. Whether it's just a role model showing them, or whatever way in our relationships. But first, we have to learn how to do it for ourselves. And then widening our intention is that we're actually doing this for ourselves so that we can be of greatest benefit, kindness toward others. So it becomes not only about ourselves, but we expand our motivation to include others. And not just those who are close to us, those who we care about dearly, of course, them, but also even all those people we don't know. All the strangers. And generating this strong determination that we're going to do our best to learn and practice and pay attention and think critically and work with our minds so that we can be of greatest benefit to as many beings as possible. So I'd like you now to go back to an awareness of your body, letting your shoulders drop and relax. Allowing your whole body to breathe. And when you exhale, feel that release of any tension, any fear, any worry. Just letting go. Because right now there's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be. And you can just take this time to rest and relax and slow down a little bit. And anywhere else you might be feeling some tension in your face or your jaw, in your abdomen, consciously let it go. And imagine it's draining away from you into the earth, which can absorb it and allow it to disappear. And then I'd like you to spend some time focusing on your breath. So finding, first of all, that inhale. So your in-breath. Just for now, focus on the full in-breath, paying attention to that. And when you breathe out, just don't focus on anything at all. Just kind of let go during that time. Notice your experience of inhaling. What are the sensations? And now I'd like you to switch and focus just on your exhale. Noticing the different sensations when you allow the breath to release. And now see if you can pay attention to the gaps in between the in-breath and the out-breath in both places. So staying present for when there is no breath occurring at all. And now bring your awareness to the whole breath, every aspect of it, fully engaged. And allow your mind to rest on the breath. And any extra thoughts that may come in, you might notice them and then let them go. Because right now they're not important and you can deal with them later. No matter how strong or urgent they ask for your attention. We're making the breath our focus now. And then I'd like you to notice how the mind is a little more still, a little more slow. Along with the stillness of the body comes this relaxation and slowing down of the mind. And in particular, pay attention to how peaceful and calm that feels. That this place of relaxation, of focus, is actually a pleasant experience. And again, if your mind starts telling you something different, you don't really have to pay attention to that right now. You can be more focused on this peaceful, still aspect of the mind. Very much right now connected to your breath, to your awareness of your breath. And coming out of your meditation slowly. And if you're having a good experience in your meditation and you stop it, even when it's going well, that's a good thing, because that'll mean that you'll want to go back. You want to get, into your meditation again when you have the opportunity. So not ending whenever you get frustrated is not the best way to do it. You want to end when things are going well. so that you have this anticipation of returning. Okay, so let's do a quick review. Yesterday, we talked about aspects of the mind, the fact that the mind is not a physical entity. It cannot be detected with the five senses, that it is clear like a mirror in the sense that it can reflect things. It is not, isn't filled with its own stuff that prevents us from seeing or knowing things. That it is knowing in the sense of it brings illumination, it brings discrimination, it can have a sense of what something is beyond simply just its appearance. It can have an understanding of whatever is reflected in it. We talked about how it changes from moment to moment, that it is constantly changing. It is like a continuum in the sense that one moment of mind, this current moment of mind, becomes a cause for the next moment of mind. And we did a meditation on that where we traced back our thoughts and our states of mind, and we could trace them back to some of the experiences we had when we were young that still are influence our mind of this life, of this time. And then we talked about the fact that it's the source of all happiness, that even though our external circumstances can be very difficult, actually our perception of them and our attitude toward them has a greater impact on whether we're happy or not. So even if we have very wonderful circumstances according to some materialistic point of view, we may not be happy. And maybe we don't have, we have very little in terms of a materialistic point of view, and we can still be happy. So it's more dependent on the mind than it is on external circumstances, which really argues for us to spend some time focusing on making our minds happier instead of spending all of our time, our whole day, our whole lives, week after week, focusing on achieving this material success only. Okay, so not saying, again, middle way, we're not saying don't have any material success, don't provide for your family or that sort of thing. We're not saying that. We're saying create space in your life for working with your mind too. And overall, that's going to make you happier. And then we talked about the fact that it's beginningless and also endless, that it was not created. It did not have a start. It has always existed. And that even after the brain dies, the mind goes on. So it's not the same as the brain, but it is interconnected with it, especially while we're alive. So we do know that there are things that we do to our body that can affect our mind, like, for example, taking drugs. And I use this, taking drugs. If I'm repeating myself, just be patient with me. So one can take drugs and cause hallucinations in the mind, can't you? Also, one can take like certain medicines, and that will help with like, say you have hallucinations that you don't want, like with a severe mental illness, one can take drugs to help decrease those hallucinations. And so we can do things to the body that affect the mind, and we can also work with the mind in a way that affects the body. So we're, through the research on meditation, we're learning that meditation can improve our immune systems, that it can, decrease our blood pressure, help us deal with stress better. Yeah, so that's just a small piece of it, but there are a lot of benefits to meditation for the body that are caused by working with the mind. And then we talked about the thinking without a thinker, that there's no single controlling part, entity, I, self, that controls all the different activities of the mind. That actually the mind can have intention, the mind can have discrimination, the mind can have, visualization, the mind can have hopes, it can have emotions, without necessarily there being a single self that is saying, now feel this, now think this, now do this, that sort of thing. Okay, so it's possible, just like a big city, for the mind to operate without that central controlling force, okay, like a single thing. And then we talked about the fact that it has parts and levels. Okay, so we also talked about Buddha nature, or Buddha potential, the fact that all of our minds in their essence are the same as the mind of a Buddha. So therefore, it's a matter of removing the ignorance or the negativities that are existent in our mind. And once we do that, we will be able to see how things actually exist. And then those negative emotions that get in the way, that cause us suffering, that cause us harm, actually will go away. And that is the process of becoming a Buddha, becoming awakened, or becoming enlightened. So any negativities in our mind are not essentially part of it. So if you have ever had the experience where you felt something, say jealousy, really, really strongly, and then at some point you worked through it, you stopped feeling that way, you know that that emotion can decrease, that it can stop. And if it were essentially part of the mind, then it would always be there. Every time you thought of that person, you would be just as jealous as you always were. And that just doesn't happen. Your jealousies go, right? Just like your other emotions, they come and go. But we do have a basic goodness which can be developed limitlessly. And when I'm talking about basic goodness, I'm talking about infinite loving kindness, infinite compassion. And the reason why this can be developed infinitely, limitlessly, is because it is in line with the nature of how things exist. Okay, so for example, when we're talking about negative emotions like anger, anger is based on an assumption that we are separate from others, that somehow others can harm us. And it's like, but in fact, we are interconnected. We are very much closely connected. And so, in fact, if someone were to harm us, it would be like the right hand harming the left hand. Okay. So it's possible for the right hand to harm the left hand, but you wouldn't hate your right hand for harming your left hand, right? You wouldn't do that. Or sometimes they use the example of a mother who has gone crazy and starts attacking you, right? You wouldn't blame your mother, you wouldn't hate her, you wouldn't consider her an enemy. You would actually have huge compassion for her and want to stop her harming you so that she didn't harm herself, right? And so this connection that is actually present for all of us is the basis of loving kindness and compassion. And so that's why it can be developed limitlessly, because we are not as separate as we believe. That is part of our basic ignorance. Okay, so this is a really hopeful concept. This idea that that all those difficulties that we experience in our lives and in our minds we can be free of them. We can develop causes and conditions so that we have different experiences in our lives. And then ultimately we can, as a Buddha, we remove those negativities completely. Okay, I mean okay, that's enough. So we have that, and oftentimes I think through advertising, through the media, through social media, a lot of our our society that is very, very focused on our appearance, our possessions, our successful career, all those things that we ways in which we compare ourselves actually encourage
this feeling of non-acceptance of who we are. And we forget to have this view of, no, actually we start off and we are basically in our essence fine and good and wonderful and, you know, positive and unique and outstanding and special, without any of the external things that may or may not be happening for us. Um, so yeah, we make these huge expectations for ourselves, and then we don't meet them, and then we get depressed. And I mean, it's just this huge, you know, negative circle of comparisons. I mean, there's, you know, social media, and, you know, and what we're doing right now can be really positive, you know, the way we're using it, but it can also be really negative, because now we have this whole world of comparisons that we can make. And when we see ourselves as separate from other beings, then comparison becomes more prominent. It becomes, you know, competition becomes important. And yeah, and then negative self-worth gets in there. You know, when I think and this was true for Tibet, when there was more of a community feeling, when people saw much more themselves as part, you know, connected to others, that there wasn't this sense of, I am not okay. Because as a community as a whole is functioning, right? And so to say, I am not okay, is to ignore the fact of our interconnectedness, of our interdependence, and to see ourselves as somehow individuals that can actually exist as not okay. And it's just not true. It's just, when you look more deeply, we can't possibly exist without others. And so to say I'm better than someone else or I'm worse than someone else doesn't make any sense. I am someone else, right? I am so connected to these others. Okay, so enough of that. Let's see. So I wanted to talk about types of meditation. So the first one I wanted to talk about is what we started to do this morning, which is this calm abiding. So you may know it as shamatha. Another term for it is single-pointed concentration. Focus. I think there was a really good book that came out called Focus that was really helpful for people to see it out of more of a religious context, especially in the States. This happened, you know, a way in which we could start to see it as a very positive kind of psychological technique for increasing our well-being. And I think that it's becoming more and more like more and more almost like exercising. You know, I think people are starting to say, you know, doctors recommending that everyone meditate at least 15 minutes a day for emotional well-being, for mental health. You know, that can be a really helpful, just like eating right, just like, you know, exercising, that meditation is really powerful in this way as well. So we talked yesterday a little bit about this default mode network, or in traditionally in Buddhism, it's called this monkey mind, this way in which the mind is constantly moving and shifting and being distracted and being pulled by whatever internal or external stimulus that comes. And when we're talking about calm abiding, we're talking about teaching the mind to rest and relax and be with one particular thing so that it can start to settle, instead of constantly moving, because movement of the mind takes energy. It takes thought, of course, and yeah, it doesn't really allow us to relax. The other thing that it does is we have this, well, especially when we're first starting to look at our minds, and for those of you who have meditated for a while, you probably have seen this. We start to see that we have this tendency to believe everything we think, that whatever comes into our mind, especially if it's powerful. So like an emotion has not only a thinking component, but it also has a physical component. So when I have a very strong emotion, like love, Okay, I love someone. My heart is, you feel your heart opening. You feel, the, your relaxation, your pupils dilate, you release certain hormones, right? You have a very physical response, and at the same time, you also have thoughts of how precious they are, how important they are, how much you care about them, how you don't want them to, be hurt. You want them to be safe. All these kinds of things, how connected you feel to them. So you have a mental component, and you also have a physical component. And so those thoughts become very powerful and very strong. And when we meditate, what we learn to do is actually see those thoughts, that they may or may not be true. We don't necessarily have to believe everything we think. And then another example of this is, when this virus first started coming out, um, and now that we're all, stuck at home, we have lots of time to read all these articles, right? All this news media about the spread of the virus, and how many people are, falling ill and dying, and, the respirators and the contagion. I mean, there is so much information about this out. And it's helpful in some ways, but it can also start to fill our minds with anxiety, with fear, with, thinking that others are the enemy, that we can't have interactions anymore because we might get sick. And, instead of seeing how, this connectedness, so we start, this fear, starts building and building. And then we think, because our minds are there, and our hearts, our bodies are there, that this is what is the most real thing in the world, right? And it isn't necessarily, it doesn't have to be. And so when we meditate, when we go into this calm abiding, we can start to create some distance between what our thoughts are, and what we want to, how we want to respond with our wisdom. Okay, so, if you suffer from anxiety, if, the news media is like making you scared all the time, and you're really uncomfortable because you feel like it's out of control, and you're helpless in the situation, and you don't want to be in that kind of state of mind. You want to be comfortable, happy, accepting, understanding, have compassion for others. Then meditation can really help you get some distance from what your mind is doing, from its this constant, you know yeah rumination over all these ways in which we feel like the situation is so out of control. Which doesn't mean that we're not being realistic, right? It's not, doesn't mean we're going to go and, violate all the precautions that they're recommending. What it means is that our minds don't have to engage in that negative emotion, in that fear, in that anxiety, in that, you know, separation from others. We can physically separate ourselves and mentally feel so connected to the whole world, to the people who are falling ill, the people who are in the same situation as us, as far as this isolation, that it's really hard for a lot of people to be all alone like we are. And so having this huge compassion for them, actually opens our heart, and eventually brings us a lot of happiness. So, calm abiding is the first step to this, learning to get some distance between our minds, and our thoughts. So, it allows our thoughts and emotions without necessarily engaging. We don't have to believe everything we think. Okay. But it's hard at first, because the mind has its own habits. It has its own agenda. So non-reactivity, the sense that, I don't have to necessarily react. When we're with others, sometimes there are things that they do that really irritate us, and we can respond very quickly, just like give, like say something mean, snap at them, or walk away from them instead of being present with them. And the more that we get into this calm abiding, to this relaxation state, the less reactive we are going to be. Okay, so a little bit more about how to do this. So we've already started you off on this, and Felipe starts every meditation with this too, with this posture, this relaxation. And then we often start you off with focusing on the breath, because the breath is easiest to find. It's right there. It's, you know, we always are breathing. And so it's very easy to find. The other thing is that the breath, because it's a tactile sensation, it is non-conceptual, which means that we aren't thinking about the breath in the sense of analyzing it. We're trying to actually go into the physical sensations of the breath. So the feeling of the expansion of the lungs and the lowering of the diaphragm, the sensations, if you're focusing on like at your nose, the sensations of the breath going in and out of your nose, the yeah, and then the whole body relaxation. And that's why we often start you lower down. We start you with the abdomen, so that you get away from your head and away from your thinking. Okay, so starting there, allowing the mind to rest there. And then of course, and this happens for many, you know, meditators for all the way up until like really high stages of learning to meditate, we have these thoughts, you know, that intrude, whether they're memories or their hopes, you know, and to plans for the future, whether they're fears, images, any, you know, TV shows we watch, songs we listen to, you know, anything can come into the mind. And it because of the mind's habit, it has this ability to pull our attention away from those tactile sensations, from the physical sensations that we're trying to stay with. And so, and that's called something called excitation. So that means that the mind is a little too stimulated to stay focused on the breath. Now, we can't just clamp down. We can't just like push those away, because it's like a rubber band. The more you stretch it, the more it's going to want to come back. The mind is like that. It's going to resist. It's like a puppy. If you've ever tried to train a puppy not to bite, and they're so mouthy when they're, this is my sister's word, I love this, mouthy. They use their mouth for everything, right, when they're puppies especially. And if you try to hold them, they think that, you know, they like react and start fighting you, and, you know, becoming even more mouthy. So you have to, and this works with your mind too, you very gently and you very kindly and very firmly, you bring it back over and over, and you stop it over and over. So what I did, I was helping with a puppy for a while, not that long ago, and I would put something in her mouth so that she wouldn't be biting my hand, right? It would put something in her mouth, and consistently over and over. And so this is what we get to do with our minds. Very kindly, very gently, we bring it back to our focus. So as soon as we have noticed that it's been drawn away by whatever is happening, we release that, whatever that was, we relax the body, and we bring it back. We bring it back to the breath. We just find the breath. And we don't get angry, and we don't put ourselves down, and we don't say what a horrible meditator we are and get frustrated, because that doesn't help either. That just makes it worse. It makes meditation not fun, not comfortable. So very kindly, very gently. And this repeated process of bringing the mind back over and over is actually the meditation. It is the training of the mind. And eventually the mind starts to get used to staying here and staying on this thing. And it starts to feel very comfortable and very peaceful. And then slowly, slowly, you can start to bring in more. You can bring in other things, right? But that's your choice. It's not that the mind is like taking off when you aren't choosing it to do that. So relaxation, stillness, and focus, alertness, awareness are all really important for this calm abiding. Okay, so then now once we have this, focus and this mind that that can stay on a specific thing, particular for now the breath, then we can bring in this other type of meditation called placement meditation, sometimes called, I have it here as analytic. Let's see. Analytic meditation. It's also known as Vipassana. Now, if you've taken Goenkaji's retreats, the Vipassana or analytic meditation for that system is a little bit different than the one that I'm going to be explaining here. The perspective and from the Burmese tradition that Goenkaji trained in was where one you move through this calm abiding, through this shamatha, and you become very focused on the sensations of the breath, the sensations of the body, and then you get insights, you get vipassana, you get analysis through those experiences. So, for example, you start to notice the impermanence of the body because you are so focused on the changing sensations in the body that you start to experience impermanence in that way, the constantly changing nature of things. So your analysis comes in through your experience. Within this system, what we're going to do is we're going to start conceptually. We're going to say, okay, impermanence is this. Or like we did yesterday, the mind is a continuum, and explaining how it's a continuum from a logical reasoning point of view. And then when you do the meditation, you think about the logic, you think about the reasoning, and then you bring your experience in and you bring the two together. So you start to see that you understand and have a realization that the logic that the teachers, the things the teachers have taught, like that things are constantly changing, are actually true because you are now having an experience of it. Okay, so it uses your thinking ability in the sense of you're generating thoughts, you're generating questions, you're looking at your assumptions. Like, for example, you'd have, like I gave the example of an iPhone, how most of us, when we first buy a new phone, we have a sense that it is going to last for a really long time. And for us, a long time is indefinitely, like forever, right? And then we, you know, as soon as we start to analyze, we start to know that no, in fact, this phone is going to die someday. You know, the battery is going to wear out, or whatever. It's going to no longer function. And so our assumption that it's going to last forever, we have to question that. But first we have to be aware of what our assumption is. Okay, this analytic meditation actually changes habitual thought patterns, and it's necessary for mental training. So once we develop this calm abiding, the calm abiding and the focus allows us, our analytic meditation, to go even deeper. Let's see. Yep, so this is where we use our wisdom. This is where we use our discriminating thought. This is where we use our logic. And for many people who have trained in meditation in a different style, you know, they haven't necessarily had exposure to this idea of applying your thinking ability to a specific topic and calling that meditation. Most people would just say, oh, that's just thinking. But what we do is that through applying that meditation in a calm, meditative state, that actually starts to change the mind, and it does eventually change the brain and the structures of the brain. They've started to show that we have something called neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity means that the cells in our brain. So when we're younger, when we're, you know, small children, we have cells in our brains called neurons. And they're really long cells, and they have, well, relatively, right, microscopically, and they have what are called branches. So they're like dendrites, okay, branches, and they connect with other neuron cells through a little gap. Okay, they have all these branches that are, you know, and they have cells here and cells here and cells here. Okay, and when we're young, we have all these branches. We have tons of branches. And what happens is that as we grow older and develop more habitual ways of thinking, these branches start to die out. Okay, so certain connections become more habitual, like a train track, you know, like a road. Okay, that these ones fire and these ones fire. Now, if we've had traumatic experiences, sometimes they get really, really powerful, right? Sorry, wrong figure. Really powerful. Okay, and through meditation, what we can start to do is we can start to grow back some of those branches and start to make different connections. So even if we'd had really strong childhood trauma or difficult experiences that make us, as soon as we're triggered again, respond in certain ways, through meditation, we can start to create new pathways, okay, in our brain as well as in our mind. This is the way in which meditation can start to affect the mind. And we do this through unifying that calm abiding with the analytic meditation. Okay, so bringing those two together. Once we have this strong focus, applying that strong focus to a specific topic to start to experience things differently instead of through fear or jealousy or self-hatred. You know, we start to think, well, what is this self, and how do I, you know, how am I really thinking about myself, and is it really true that I am unworthy, or I am undeserving, or I am unlovable? Okay, these assumptions that we have, you know, that can be very deep-seated if we develop them at a young age. We can start to question those, and through meditation we can start to change those habitual ways of thinking. Okay, so let's take some questions now, and then yeah, and then we'll do some more meditation. So if you have questions, go ahead and write them in your chat, and Felipe, I'll call on you.
Please write any your questions, don't be shy.
I can teach some more if you don't have questions.
Okay, here we have one. Let me unmute you. Pranav, 1 second. Pranav Patab, you can now ask your question out loud.
Yeah. Thank you, Drolma.
Hi.
I was wondering how important is meditation to know the real nature of things, the nature of mind? Is it little important? Is it the only way? Is it the most important thing?
Well, it's actually, they talk about this process of learning the nature of the mind, getting realizations, getting understanding, as having 3 parts. So they talk about, first you have to hear about it. So there's this listening, and it can include reading. Then you also have to contemplate it. So you have to integrate it into your thinking structure. If it just goes in one ear and out the other, it's not going to have any impact. And then, yes, meditation is going to be necessary eventually. Now, if you have a lot of difficulty meditating, and so then you don't want to do it, then you can stay with the contemplation for as long as you want. And that actually starts to create the conditions for meditation to become more attractive, to become something you can engage in and want to do. So eventually it becomes very important, yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, now I'm going to unmute Alice S. You can now ask your question out loud.
Hello. Yes. I'm wondering because I meditated for 1 hour this morning, but then my mind kept wandering away, and I was only able to focus on my breath for like 20 seconds on the entire hour. So after that hour, I tried to not be frustrated, but I was just wondering if I'm only able to focus on my breath for like 20 seconds, the rest of the time I couldn't even feel it. Was my meditation completely useless?
No, no, because the whole time, well, first of all, starting off with an hour when you're a beginner is not what is recommended. It's actually better to do more frequent and shorter. So if you do like 10 or 15 minutes and then take 10 minutes off, and then go back and do 10 or 15 minutes and then take 10 minutes off, that actually is more effective an hour than sitting for a whole hour. Okay, that's going to work better for training the mind. Now, the reason why it wasn't a total waste was because during that time you were becoming aware of how your mind actually functions. You were starting to bring your focus internally instead of externally, and that's going to continue to give you more information and more experience with how to work with your mind. So no, absolutely not. It was not a waste, because you did hit 20 seconds, and the rest of the time you were figuring out how to hit 20 seconds, right? You were working with it. You were watching it. So no, no. And that's so normal. And you start to see, they say that for beginners, oftentimes we start to think that when we're meditating, that when we first start meditating, that our minds are even more busy than they were before. But the fact is that we just never noticed them. We just never looked at them that closely before. They're actually that busy all the time, but now we're starting to see it. Yeah.
You mentioned shorter time. So then when do I know when I can start increase the time?
You might want to do it systematically, like do for like a month, do only 15-minute sessions, and then try to expand it to like 20 minutes. Alan Wallace talks about 24 minutes. And then when you expand, if you try like expanding for about a week, and if you don't feel like it's helpful, you're getting frustrated and you're not having good sessions ever, you can't really judge like one session, then you may have to go back down. Okay. But I think making, like giving yourself like, 4 or 5 weeks of just 15-minute sessions, and then increasing it and seeing what happens when you increase it. Okay. But you could, like I said, you can do 3 15-minute sessions in an hour with 5 minutes in between, because psychologically stopping, getting up, moving around, and then coming back, it refreshes you. Yeah, it refreshes your attention.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, now I'm going to unmute Ginger. 1 second. Okay, Ginger, you can now ask your question.
Hello, thank you. It's just a very simple question, but
Sure.
As you were describing analytic meditation, is that the same as insight meditation?
I think that the term insight meditation from, people like Joseph Goldman and Sharon Salzberg, is that what you're talking about? Is that where you got that term insight meditation? Is that the system that?
I'm not sure. It's just something that I hear about.
Okay.
I haven't.
Yeah, that term comes out of also the Burmese tradition and the Thai tradition. And so it may be more similar to what I first explained about, where you have meditative experiences and then you get insights from them. And then analysis and analytic meditation is a little bit different. It comes at it from a more starting off with the concepts first and then moving to the experience.
I see. Yeah.
So it depends. Yeah, it really depends on what you're talking about as far as insight. I mean, you could say that analytic meditation is insight, but I don't think that popularly the term is used in the same way.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And another one?
I'm going to unmute Michael Goldfarb. Michael Goldfarb, now you can ask your question out loud.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
What should our split be between analytic and calm abiding meditation? How long should we do each one every day?
Yeah. So it depends, you know, of course it depends on what your schedule is like and what time you have. And also where you're at in terms of your practice as far as being, how advanced you are. I put more emphasis on my calm abiding in the beginning. So if you depending, you know, how, if you've been meditating for a while and your calm abiding and your shamatha is pretty stable, then you can start to increase your time of analytic meditation. So like when you're first starting off, doing more sessions of calm abiding and fewer of analytic, and then starting to expand as you get better at your calm abiding, you expand to include like 50-50. So if you have a strong calm abiding, you do that for 15 minutes and then you do your analytic for 15 minutes. So does that make sense?
Yeah. And is that something you want to do it, or like what would the frequency be?
Well, like I said, it depends on your time. If you're home all the time, if you can do 15 minutes every hour, that would be outstanding, right? So I mean, the constraints of reality, you know, are what can you do? And that, and I wouldn't want to push it in the sense of, you know, doing 15 minutes every hour. If you're like, oh my gosh, here I have to go back to the cushion again, you know, you wouldn't want to do that either. So it's really going to depend on, you know, what you can do, and your capacity for meditation grows, but it grows slowly because the mind has to become more tolerant of this activity that it's not used to, which is, you know, sitting still, focusing inward, calming down. So, you know, I you know, if you can do 15 minutes, you know, 3 times a day, you know, that's amazing, that's wonderful. And then expand it to, you know, 24 minutes 3 times a day, you know, and then, you know, go from there. So it's what you have the capacity to do. I think 3, well, they, you know, yeah, there isn't much recommendation like specifically on how many and how often, because you had the teachings come from people who were either, you know, lay people who worked and tended farms and, you know, took care of livestock and that sort of thing, or they were the monks who were, you know, in the monasteries, who were, that was their focus completely for their whole life. Or they talk about yogis who lived, you know, in a cave and meditated all the time. So you don't have specifics for lay people like, you know, modern people who are family, you know, have a family, maybe own a house, maybe have a job, and are also practicing spiritually. So that's kind of a new thing in many ways, because the lay people traditionally, at least in Tibet, didn't, you know, they didn't have the capacity to be able to practice as much as we do in our society, and yet at the same time have, you know, a regular life, so to speak.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so
Thank
it's
you.
something you get to figure out. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Do you want to do one more? Okay, I'm going to unmute Anush. No, it's not here anymore, so I'm going to unmute Trisha.
Hi. So my question is, I usually I'm in the practice of doing guided meditations, but I also know a lot of friends who meditate without any, say, like audio, kind of guidance in the background. So what would you recommend? And if I were to not have this guidance, how do I pick a topic to analyze, so to speak, in the analysis part of my meditation?
Oh, sorry, Venerable, you're muted. 1 second. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So I think when you're first starting out, that guided meditation is really, really helpful. That it can provide the structure that you need. So I still do guided meditation, especially when I'm learning a new meditation technique, at least for part of my sessions during, not every session, but for part of like one session a day, I will do guided meditation, because then I can take that guided meditation and I can do it myself, especially if I've done it quite a few times. Like if I've listened to the same guided meditation, like, 10 or 15 times in the course of a month, then I get to where I sit down and do it by myself and I remember. Right? I remember what has been guided for me. And then so that's even in my calm abiding. Also in calm abiding, it's good to get some kind of a starting off routine, a series of ways in which you go into your meditation. Like I've been taking you through, starting off with some deep breaths, posture, deep breaths, motivation, body scan, and then moving into the breath. And then you stay with the breath for the majority of the session, and then you go into a dedication. So that's usually my calm abiding session will be like that. I move into it with a specific sort of routine or structure. And then the guided ones, it is really the analytic meditation when you have guidance, especially if you have a good meditation leader like Felipe, who who pauses to give you time to bring in your own experiences, to follow the topic, because sometimes when we do analytic meditation without some kind of guidance, we can get off topic very easily. And when you have someone who is guiding you, then you tend to stay on the topic because you listen to them, and they're keeping you on the topic. So I would say that following guidance more when you're first starting off, more than even calm abiding, because calm abiding you can guide yourself sooner. But with analytic, you might need it for a little bit longer. But with analytic, if you choose not to follow a guided meditation, what you can do is have a book in front of you where you read a little bit about the topic, and then you think about it. You stop for 5 or 10 minutes and you contemplate and eventually meditate on this specific thing that you've been reading. And then as soon as you recognize that you're completely off topic and you're thinking about something else, then you open your eyes and you go back to your book, and maybe you read the next paragraph or you read the next thing, and so that keeps you on the topic. Did you have any follow-up for that? Is that good?
Yeah, that's good. I really like the book idea.
Okay, good. Yeah, and it doesn't take much, a sentence or two. And in the texts for download, the link on the Tushita website, in the back you have a bibliography. There's some good books that they're called. One is called How to Meditate by Kathleen MacDonald. And the second one is Guided Meditations on the Stages of the Path, I think. And it's by Thupten Chodron. You gonna write that, Felipe?
Yep, I'm writing it right now.
Okay, I think that's what it's called, Guided.
Yeah, guided meditations of the stages of the path. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, by Thupten Chodron. And they even have a CD along with that book has guided meditations.
Yeah, that's when you buy the hard copy, you get a CD with all the guided meditations from Venerable to Children on that one.
Thank you. That was really useful.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do some guided meditation now.
There we go. Give me 1 sec to write one more thing.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna mute you, Venerable. Activate my video. Okay. Good. Can you hear me? Can you see me? All right. Okay, so going back to a comfortable position. Bring your body back to a relaxed state and keep your back especially loosely upright. Try your best to remain grounded and calm. And as we've done before, allowing the bell to bring you back into the space of the body. Allowing the awareness to land in this realm of physical sensations. And going all the way down to where your body meets the cushion, the chair, the floor, or whatever surface you're in contact with. Simply being aware of this sensation of contact, of pressure, of weight. Taking a moment to become grounded, stable, connecting with the earth element present within the body, which signifies solidity. There's no need to be rigid or tense. Try to find a middle way between being too tense and too relaxed. A point where the body can also be relaxed but alert and stable. And gently expand your awareness to cover the entire space of the body. Taking a moment to observe your body as a whole. Be aware of its limits. But pay attention to whatever physical sensations arise. Now we can simply let the body relax. And in order to bring it back to its natural state, which is a state of calmness, relaxation, and stillness, you can give yourself the luxury of 3 deep breaths, filling in the lungs through full capacity with the in-breath, breathing in fully and completely, and then gently releasing the out-breath naturally and uncontrived. As you breathe in, expand the areas of tension and tightness. As you breathe out, relax and let go. breathing in peace and calmness, breathing out thoughts, worries, and concerns. And as you release this tension, as you let go of all tightness, notice how your body becomes relaxed and stable, goes back to its natural state. And at that point, you can simply let it rest. And for a moment, just let go of the doing activity of the mind. Simply be with the body as it is. Take a moment to experience your body resting in its natural state. Simply observe it. Simply experience it. Your body relaxed in this way becomes the basis, the foundation for the practice of meditation. And at this point, you can simply let go of observing the body, let go of physical sensations. And now we go into the space of the mind where thoughts and mental images arise. So first imagine that you go outside to take a walk. It is a beautiful sunny day. The temperature is just right, not too hot, not too cold. And so you decide to walk, to take a hike uphill. And as you follow a path, it takes you into a forest area. Here, the leaves of the trees filter the sunlight, making it diffuse and gentle. As you walk up, try to pay attention to the different things around you. All the trees, the smell of the wood, perhaps the animals and insects around you, flowers or other plants. Notice whatever sensory input might come from your surroundings. You might even hear the flow of water of a creek nearby, running downhill. As you keep walking up, this forest becomes less and less dense. More space between the trees allows more sunlight to come in. You can hear birds chirping away, And as you progress on your way up, suddenly the forest stops, and near the top of the hill, a clearing appears. There is lovely green grass on the top of the hill. And as you reach this area, you can now see the whole blue sky. There's not a single cloud in it. In front of you, you have a vast expanse of endless and limitless sky. You can see all the way to the horizon. And down you can also see the valley and some mountains. But being in this very nice spot, you decide to lay down on your back and directing your eyes upward. At this point, you see nothing but this blue and infinite sky. There is nothing else in your field of vision other than the sky, the space in front of you. Take a moment to feel this experience of infinite space. No obstruction, no distractions, simply openness. And so release your awareness into the space. Imagine that this space pervades all directions. Merge your mind with the sky, making it open and expansive. Try to stay with this experience for as long as you can. Whatever thoughts, mental images, or sensory input come from the different senses, you can simply see them as clouds passing by. Clouds come from the sky and dissolve back into it. They don't upset or disturb the sky in any way. So in the same way, allow your mind to become open, expansive, and undisturbed, steady, connecting with the aspect of clarity. you find yourself getting distracted by sensory input or discursive thoughts, just recognize these distractions and gently let them go, let them dissolve like clouds in the sky, and simply go back to this experience of openness, of unobstructed space pervading all directions. And if you feel completely lost, then you can go back to imagining laying down on that top hill of grass, looking up into the sky, and once again connecting with that experience. Simply release your awareness into space. And feel that openness. Feel your mind as the sky. And slowly and gently coming out of the meditation, becoming aware once more of your body, your surroundings, coming back to your senses and trying to keep that awareness that everything that appears to the mind is like clouds appearing in space, in the sky. So now we go into the third part of any practice within Buddhism, and we'll do a brief dedication, which basically acknowledges that we've done something good, something positive, something virtuous in this session. And so, in order to share that positiveness, that good energy with others, we can dedicate. And for this, we'll use the Shantideva's dedication, which I'm right now posting on the chat as well, so you can follow as I read. And try to reflect on the words and to make them as personal As possible, you can even bring to mind some people that you know of who are struggling with difficulties and offer for them. And of course, in this current situation that we're all experiencing and with the people that are suffering from this disease, we can definitely take some parts of this very beautiful prayer very much to heart. So let's dedicate. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms, and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and finally repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective, and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain, to dispel the mysteries of the world. May it be so.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. I just wanted to tell you that tomorrow after the class, so we'll do our whole class as usual for an hour and a half, and then we'll take like a short 5-minute break. And then if anyone wants to stay around for an extra hour, we'll open that up for questions of any kind, you know, any kind of questions you want to bring up. So we'll have, if you haven't been able to ask your questions during, you know, these 4 days, you'll have that opportunity then. So we'll go for an hour, we'll break for 5 minutes and then go for an hour and do a question and answer session. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you
See you
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.